to the Michelangelo video. Ross Long with us today. And we're going to be talking very soon to our guest on Skype. This segment of the world-famous Jiggy Jaguar show brought to you by our good friends at Rock Biz Magazine. More than rock, more than entertainment, more than you expected. Come rock with us at Rock Biz Magazine, rockbizmagazine.com. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, Rock Biz Magazine working on their March and April issues, so be on the lookout for that as well. Hope to be a lot of interesting things coming from our friends at Rock Biz Magazine. Head over to JiggyJaguar.com right now, JiggyJaguar.com, and we have a brand new message board via our friends at KJAG Radio. That, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is 92.3 FM, and of course AM 1670 in Casper, Wyoming. KJAGRadio.com is their website, so go over and check that out as well. Also, my latest article on Salina Post is available, I believe.
Are people still
They're still complaining. They still don't like me over there at the Salina Post. No, they don't. They like me. I don't know what's going on over here, ladies and gentlemen. It's we love it. Winter sheen dinner, by the way. I don't really know half the time what goes on with this broadcast, but it goes. It happens.
It does go, doesn't it?
We're off and running. That's pretty much what it is, and I'm trying to adjust something. I hate technology. I've said this on many occasions. I think probably because I don't understand it. You want to tweet me?
But sometimes you don't want to
understand it. And you can tweet Ross, but Ross hates being tweeted.
I don't tweet. No.
He hates tweets.
I let you tweet.
We're going to be speaking to Richard Gage here in just a second. He is the San Francisco Bay Area architect, Richard Gage, the AIA member of the American Institute of Architects, and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Richard Gage is a San Francisco Bay architect, as I mentioned. The guy has been practicing architecture for over 20 years and has worked on most types of building construction, including numerous fireproofed, steel-framed buildings. Most recently, he worked on the construction documents for a $400 million mixed-used urban project with 1.2 million square feet of retail parking structure and 320,000 square feet of mid-rise office space, altogether about with 1,200 tons of steel framing. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high-rises after hearing the startling conclusions of a reluctant 9/11 researcher by the name of David Ray Griffin on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 9/11. And Richard is on the Skype with us. How are you doing, sir?
Very, very good, James. How are you today?
Pretty good, actually. Ross is here with us. Ross, you have anything for Richard before I jump in and just abuse him and grill him?
No. This is a professional here, so I'm sure I'll have a question coming up. But, yeah, we're getting you real good on Skype there, Richard. Hopefully you can see Jiggy there. Yes.
Well, I can't see anybody right now.
Well, don't worry about it. As long as you can hear us, we can do the questions.
That'll work.
Very good.
But we see you and we see your sign, AE911truth.com. People need to go there, read more about you.
Look at that.
.org.
Oh, .org. Oh, that's. Oh, I'm sorry. Your ear was in the way, so.
Now, Richard Gage, AIA. Tell us about some of the how you came about to be so involved with this and research the heck out of this.
Well, 4 years ago, this issue was not very well understood by all the people in the United States, and David Ray Griffin was being interviewed on this radio station in Berkeley, and I was just shocked. I had to pull my car over and listen, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, an alternative theory as to how these towers came down on 9/11. It just blew my mind. I said, I would have heard about this, you know, if there were explosives in these towers, if the firemen saw molten metal flowing like lava, they said, molten steel, they were talking about it. And in all of this testing for explosives in the dust that was done and found positive. This is extremely disturbing information, so I set out to determine if it really could be true, and by God, it was. And so I said, well, where are the architects and engineers who are talking about this? And for some reason, there was only a couple of them out there, but they weren't organized. And so I knew what I had to do, because there were other organizations for the exposure of the evidence of 9/11, the Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, many other organizations. So I took the presentation that Stephen Jones, a physicist formerly from Brigham Young University, he had put together this PowerPoint presentation. I stole it, modified it, took it to the architecture firm I worked for at the time. 14 people came. They all thought I was nuts beforehand 4 years ago. And as I presented this information to them, bribing them with pizza, getting them into the lunch hour, they all agreed with me. Oh, my God. Of course, you're right. I didn't know about this evidence. How could I have missed this? And all of them signed our petition, except for one who was Middle Eastern and was very concerned at that point about what he was learning, because the implications of this information are really quite dark for our country. It implies that there was someone on the inside planting these explosives in this building. And so we'll talk about all the evidence for these explosives, but we'll avoid speculation as to who it might have been.
So we're not talking a conspiracy along the lines of, some government agency actually made this happen to wake us up, or you're talking this more as an inside job, that this there was actually a foreign agent or something that was in the towers that...
what we've uncovered is enough evidence to demand of the Congress to put together a new investigation. There's evidence of explosives in the buildings. We start with just the videos themselves. They're very obvious, as a matter of fact. In fact, this is we're told it's an orange, but actually it's an apple. They're that different. What we see, for instance, in the case of the North Tower, which above the point of jet plane impacts, we have this 15-story section of building mass, which we're told drove the rest of the tower, the Twin Tower, all the way down to the ground. But what we see in the videos is something dramatically different. What we see is that this 15-story section is imploding on itself before there's any movement downward. In 4 seconds, this upper portion is destroyed itself, dismembering its structural members completely in what could only be called a classic controlled demolition from at that upper point. And then after that, there's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down. The videos are very clear. The building is tearing itself apart, and at almost free fall acceleration. It's almost going down in about 11 to 12 seconds, as fast as a bowling ball dropping off the top of the building almost. And then it's hurling these massive 9-ton perimeter wall units with instant speed out the side of the tower, landing 600 feet away. But they're being hurled at 70 to 80 miles per hour. And this is an extraordinary evidence of high-order damage, which the National Fire Protection Association Manual 921, the textbook for fire and arson and explosives investigations, defines as high-order damage and requires an explosive investigation, which NIST never did, they won't do. They've steered the investigation away from explosives from the very beginning, even though they've been presented with the chemical evidence of explosives by the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, who finds billions Well, they find iron-rich microspheres, and there must be billions by the amount that they found. For instance, in the Deutsche Bank building, these previously molten iron microspheres comprise 7% of the dust in the high-rise across the street. Now, how do you get molten iron out of office fires or jet fuel? You don't. Office fires, jet fuel get to be about 14 to 1600 degrees. So where did these billions of molten iron microspheres, the diameter of a human hair, if I have any hairs left, this is extraordinary. Well, if there were thousands of cutter charges throughout the columns and beams in this building, and they were thermite incendiaries, which is a unique form of controlled demolition, and by the way, this would be a deceptive controlled demolition designed to be blamed on the fires. One would expect that they'd use something besides these high-energy explosives, which provide loud bangs and bright flashes, some of which were seen anyway, by the way. But largely, incendiaries they go under the radar, except for all the molten metal, which the first responders, structural engineers, and cleanup workers find in abundance at the base of all three of these buildings. Now, steel doesn't even begin to melt, or iron, until about 2,700 degrees. That's twice the temperatures capable of being produced by the office fires. So we have this evidence that all lines up in favor of thermite incendiaries, which, by the way, if they were going off under these explosive conditions during the destruction of the Twin Towers, one would expect that their byproduct, which is liquid molten iron, would be dispersed by the explosive pressures into what? Small iron spheres. This is the only explanation that is rational for the existence of all these spheres. And it's backed up in the dust. And it's backed up by the existence and the findings by scientists of these small red-gray chips in all the samples that they took. And these are red on one side, gray on the other. The red side is composed of extremely small particles of iron oxide and aluminum powders, which are the essential ingredients of what?
Thermite, yes.
and they're in the perfect proportion to each other, 1/4 to 3/4, to make up that thermite, and they're intimately mixed, and they're nanoscale products, which means that they're highly engineered, very technically advanced materials made only in the most sophisticated defense contracting laboratories, by the way. So we do have some directions we can start pointing fingers in for an investigation, but not for blame yet.
Now that's interesting, because I may have I guess you could call it a layman's knowledge, a little bit of thermite. I believe it was developed and made popular in the incendiary bombs of World War II, and I believe they also mixed phosphorus with that. But I had thought thermite was less explosive and, used like for a thermite grenade to more, to destroy an enemy's gun if at a commando raid, or but you're talking a thermite explosive, actually, that would cut steel at high temperature.
Well, thermite was designed to melt steel and to either bond it or cut it. It can do either, depending on the engineering. And so in this case, with a thermite cutter charge, which were patented well before 9/11, which ejects this molten iron in milliseconds to cut steel, this can be very, very effective for that purpose as well, and quieter, because, as you know, it's an incendiary as opposed to an explosive.
Yes, and what temperatures are we talking that would have to, be achieved to cause, what the evidence that you found?
Well, thermite creates 4,500 degree liquid molten iron as its byproduct, and so not only is it capable of cutting through the steel, but it persists as liquid molten iron. And that's the reason for the persistence of these extremely high temperatures documented by Bechtel and others, engineers and so forth, lasting for months throughout the debris pile. They couldn't put these fires out. They were put a lake of water down there. But as many people know, thermite has its own source of oxygen. It burns just as well underneath water, and this is probably the only other rational explanation for the incredible persistence of this heat, also documented in the infrared images produced by NASA, the AVERIS equipment.
Now, I understand, sir, that as I remember at the time, they were saying that, the maximum temperature that could be, achieved just with, I guess, JP4 jet fuel or whatever, the formula of jet fuel, and then the whatever it could have ignited on those office floors was a maximum of maybe 2,000 degrees, and that doesn't even approach the temperatures we're talking about that could have caused such damage. Is that what you're saying?
In fact, NIST has no evidence for fires over about 400, 500, 600 degrees. Now, theoretically, fires can get to be about 1,400 to 1,600 degrees with perfect fuel-air mixture ratios. But even that is only half the temperature of this phenomena that we find throughout Lower Manhattan. Underneath in the debris pile. So some other means of producing this heat has to be looked at, and all the evidence lines up to support the hypothesis of thermite. In fact, thermate is a very special form of thermite. They add sulfur to the mix, and it becomes much more effective. And FEMA themselves, in the first documentation of the collapse of the towers and Building 7, which we'll come to, it documents in their Appendix C of their Building Performance Assessment Report in May of 2002, the melting of the steel beams with what? Molten iron. They have no explanation for where the molten iron came from. Yes, there's iron in steel, but this is pure elemental liquid molten iron, which is, again, the byproduct of thermite, with a hot sulfur corrosion attack, they say, invading the grain boundaries of the steel. So the New York Times called this the deepest mystery of all in World Trade Center. And yet NIST, when they took over the investigation in 2004, eliminated this critical forensic evidence because it didn't align with their collapse by fire and jet plane impact theory.
Well,
so this is very important.
What's the possibilities here? I mean, how nefarious are we talking? Like I'm saying, did a government agent get into the buildings and plant explosives, or how worried should we be here? I mean, where did these explosives in, or these thermite bombs, these incredibly technological, tools? What's happening here?
Well, the 1,450 architects and engineers that I represent, all of whom are calling for a new investigation, want to know the answer to that question as well. We're not researchers, we're not investigators, but we have enough evidence lined up to require of every conceivable appropriate agency in our country a new investigation, and if we can't get one from them, we'll get one outside from an international body. But we're very determined, and I hope you'll join us in demanding such.
Now, the physical evidence of what you're talking about, it still exists. Is it in the hands of the government now, or do you and your group have some of this evidence?
Oh, we've provided everything we've talked about so far and a lot more to NIST. In fact, we sent in a request for correction of their report, citing all of this evidence. And they wrote, particularly, by the way, the release of the computer input data, which they used to prove that the towers in Building 7 came down according to structural weakening due to fire. This isn't a public set of public buildings, or it was with the Port Authority, and the worst structural failures in modern history, 3 of them. And yet we have a complete closed system where they will not release the computer data. So one of our items in the request for correction was to release this computer data so that architects and engineers can re-examine, what they've done, because so much of it doesn't make sense. They won't release it, citing that it might jeopardize public safety. Well, in fact, of course, the reverse is true. It jeopardizes public safety if you don't release this information. That's the problem, because these computer models that they used in the case of Building 7 show a very different collapse in their computer models than what actually happened in the videos. Building 7 was a 47-story skyscraper about a football field in length away from the Twin Towers. And it caught fire as a result of some of these beams that were shot so far and so fast out of the side of the towers. At about 5:20 in the afternoon, after burning for really only about 4 hours, these and with small isolated pockets of fire, this building drops slowly.
Hold on just a second, Richard. We've got a phone call. Hold on just a second, Richard.
You have a phone call.
Jiggy Jaguar show, you're on the air. What's up? Oh, it's a text to landline message. I love those. I love this stuff, Richard. Now, Richard Gage is with us today, the AIA. Ross, you got anything with Richard before we wrap up here?
I just find it very interesting. At first I thought you were all these conspiracy theorists, but you guys seem to be a lot of professionals, and you're not touting a possible conspiracy or anything, but you just want a closer look at the evidence. It seems
that's
like.
Correct. Particularly how Building 7 drops suddenly, smoothly, symmetrically, straight down into its own footprint at free fall acceleration, and it completes its drop in about 6.5 seconds. How can fire remove the columns symmetrically and synchronistically timed floor by floor within 1/10 of a second on each floor in order to facilitate the straight down drop of this building? It makes no sense. Explosives are the only reasonable answer, and yet they wouldn't investigate for it.
Well, Richard, I appreciate you making time for us today. Mention the website where people can get more information on you as we leave you today, my friend.
You bet. Go to ae911truth.org, and you'll find that we'll be in Hartford, Connecticut, Saturday, March 26th. You can get the address there. And we have a Midwest tour through 10 cities during the month of April. And then we'll be in Atlanta and Gainesville mid-May.
Well,
so we hope to see you on the road.
If you swing through Kansas, give us a holler. We'd love to come out and chat with you, my friend.
We'll be in Kansas City, so come out and see.
Okay, I will get somebody up there to chat with you, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks,
I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, my friend.
You bet. Take care.
Have a good day.
We'll talk to you soon, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Richard Gage from the AIA on the big broadcast. Ross, if you want to grab our friend Planet Anita on the Skype real quick, and then we'll tell her, hey, you gotta hold on a second.
Okay. Yes. And okay. So what's our plan here?
Oh, we're gonna take a quick little timeout, but if we can pull her up real quick and say, hey, we're gonna take.
So she's not mad because I had to decline her once. Here we go.
So.
Richard Gage. Okay.
Let's